The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Boss Hole Chronicles, where we never want to waste a good opportunity to learn from a bad boss. And everything we do is designed to transform and inspire boss holes to not be boss holes. Anyhow, it's good to be with you. I'm Sara Best, your co-host, and I am joined today by the best co-host on the planet, Mr. John Brower. Greetings, John. How are you?
Greetings, Sara. I am quite well. Thank you for that very kind introduction. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We averted Snowmageddon this week, and
Right.
It's Friday, so there's a blessing in that, and all is well.
Our listeners know we get a little punchy on Friday afternoons.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll see if we can coherently present this important topic, which, by the way, what we're talking about today is breaking news, hot off the press. It's something we've been tracking for years, and it's definitely been informing, what we do and why we do it. I think it's so relevant, and I hope our listeners, sit up and take notice, because this is a solvable issue. John, I'm going to toss it over to you. Tell us what we're talking about today.
Okay, Sara, happy to do that. And just, I think everybody that's been tracking along just with January so far, we had Dr. Amy Edmondson. We've got a lineup of amazing subject matter experts that are going to be continuing. But as Sara said, this breaking news was really something that we felt warranted its own episode, and we want to drop this in. The breaking news is published this week by Gallup, was their latest report, which was recently highlighted in an article by Matt Gonzalez from SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. And it's got some really alarming data in it. And the headline is Employee Disengagement Hits a 9-year High. So we thought this is so relevant. We're talking about it all the time. Our loyal followers out there in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation understand exactly what we're talking about. But the fact that it is at a 9-year high absolutely warrants some discussion. So, Sara, why don't you lead us into the early parts of that article?
Can we just set a little stage here, John, by sharing that Gallup has been measuring employee engagement data all the way back to the year 2000. In our world, we define engagement as an emotional connection to the mission. I think they might call it something a little bit different, but it means that people are satisfied and fulfilled and successful, and they're bringing their whole selves to the work.
Right.
So I think the bad news for us in our country is that for the last 23 years, we've been significantly low in employee engagement, meaning larger numbers of people than not are reporting that they are not satisfied, they are not happy, and they are not engaged at work. And, there's a cost. Let's just pause for a minute and say, gosh, what is that disengagement costing our organization? We could put a price tag on that. That's a whole nother conversation. But in terms of the data over the last 20 years, we've never been able to get significant gains on employee engagement, even though we've thrown money in programs and all kinds of things at engagement. So this is so significant. And in the article, we get an understanding of what significantly has changed. So let's just note too, if we go back to pre-pandemic data, back in 2018, employee engagement was at about 34%, meaning 60 to 70% of our employees were disengaged. And Gallup also defines active disengagement, which is not just, quiet quitting or people hanging out, not bringing their heart and their soul to the work. It's people who are sabotaging what you're doing.
Right.
And so there's a greater cost to that. If we just jump ahead, though, during the pandemic, there was an uptick, and we reached an all-time high in terms of engagement. So the number there was at 36% of the whole workforce. So still not, still kind of abysmal, but I think people rallied together during that early part of the pandemic. But it shouldn't surprise us that it has dropped quite significantly. We're now at 32%. So SHRM helps us, and this article from Matt helps us understand and breaks down why. Is that helpful, John?
Oh, absolutely. And just to give some context, the research itself, the study looked at 67,000 full and part-time employees that were surveyed as part of it. The other thing that I think is alarming is that this is also avoidable. We have been talking about this for the longest time. And I don't know, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, you and I did a lot of work around resilience, working with leadership groups around resilience and being prepared. And you've heard me say this so many times. If the pandemic demonstrated anything, it revealed a huge vulnerability that we had in sound and effective leadership. That management level was not prepared fully. I mean, I'm not talking about every organization out there, but the data supports that they were just not ready and enabled and equipped to deal with a worldwide pandemic. Okay, well, who was? But the fact that this continues to drop, and if we really don't find that turning point, the American workforce is not going to be anything to shout about. And we got some amazing examples out there, but there is nothing like, this objective data that wakes us up to say, what could we be doing more broadly through our organizations? So, Sara, what are the things that really happened in this study, the steepest declines that they recognized based on the work that they did?
Well, John, they break down for us impact on age, gender, and job type in the workforce. We can unpack each of those, but I do think we can understand, we want to understand what the heck happened. So if we were at a record high engagement level between 2019 and 2022, which we were, what changed? And the change began to happen late in 2021. And in their research, Gallup identifies a couple of key things, well, actually 5 of them, that as you and I talked, John, even before recording this episode, like, we could do something about this. We could do something about these things.
Right.
Okay, so here they are. Clarity of expectations, connection to the mission and purpose of the company, opportunities to learn and grow, opportunities to do what employees do best, and last but not least, feeling cared about at work. So for all the people I know, like some people I actually really know would be going, oh God, here we go again. People need to be cared about at work. Nobody cared about me when I worked, like my retired friends might say, suck it up, buttercup, and do your job.
That's right. Well, and again, we hear that from, I would say, a more seasoned part of the workforce. I think it's safe to say, Sara, you and I even come from a bit of that generation. However, that is an old model. That old mental model, the old command and control workplace. We talk about it time and time again. It is something that is bygone, and organizations that fail, and clearly a lot of them are failing to recognize the more a model that is more rooted in trust and autonomy and creating psychological safety and equipping managers to be more effective. That's what's going to turn that downward trend upward when it comes to more engagement. But the thing that strikes me, that very first one, clarity of expectations. And when we do leadership academies, when we are working and coaching executives or coaching managers, that is always, I know for me and I know for you, the very first thing is, are you clearly articulating the expectations of the people that report to you? And conversely, I think you made this point before we hit record, managers don't even necessarily have clear expectations from senior level. So it goes all the way to the top. You have to assume, I think it's fair to assume that this issue starts at the top, no question about it. Would you agree with that?
I would. I have a great example. Was talking to somebody this week who is part of, it's really a non-leadership team. Like it has not been declared as a leadership team. In fact, sometimes they're like sub ground leadership team, because they're just trying to influence decisions in the organization. And it really comes down to one person making the decisions. But in this particular case, there's no clarity or ownership provided around a very key initiative. So it wouldn't surprise any of us that a couple of the executives are kind of bumping into each other about how to make it go forward. And therefore, as you can imagine, it's not moving forward at all.
Not at all.
So a lot of, like posturing, positioning, like a chessboard. If I move over here, maybe they'll see it this way and we can go this way. And I think that happens a lot. And it does start at the top. Any chief executive officer or chief leader should take time right now to evaluate, who do I have on my leadership team? First of all, do I have a leadership team? Who do I have on that team?
Right.
And do they know with certainty what they're responsible to perform and achieve? And have I equipped them to be able to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, living in ambiguity is a veritable death trap for a lot of people. They just need to know what the expectations are. They need to know what the product is, that they're working to build.
Right.
And to not have that is like standing outside without breathing any air. It just doesn't work.
Right. And don't think for a minute, your people don't see that. And they don't feel that as well. Yeah, another one of that list of 5 that really jumps out at me, Sarah, because it's central to the work that we do, is the 5th one, which was opportunities to do what employees do best. We are all, listeners out there in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, we are all about job fit and manager fit. And our analytics, the work we do around behavioral data, EQ, psychological safety, strategic alignment, all of the tools we use are about optimizing job fit and optimizing manager fit. And it's so attainable. We just need those senior leaders to stop thinking. And quite frankly, I'm going to go back to something. I'm getting a little heated here now. Sarah, you and I both know a business leader. And at the onset of the pandemic, he said, and I just remember this, we're not participating in the pandemic. You remember that? And
I do.
Yeah. And it's like,
we're like,
really?
What? Okay.
So I think it's that arrogance and that hubris to think I know better than Gallup. I know these statistics. It's everybody else. No, It's not. It's your company. So make that transformation to say, I'm going to break the mold that has gotten us here. And I'm going to really lean into something like talent optimization, or something that allows managers to break free from that old boss hole model and really, again, reinvent the role of the manager. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, relevant to the job fit, manager fit piece, opportunities for employees to do what they do best. I think we have to consider the head, the heart, and the briefcase. We've talked about that as a framework for understanding the whole person. And most of the time, we're fitting people to jobs based on the briefcase, which is in fact the least effective predictor of success in a role.
Right.
We may dabble in understanding their values and their passions and interests and the things that reside in their heart. But what a lot of organizations still don't have access to is the data about how they work, what's in their head, their cognitive and their behavioral data. And when we think about opportunities to do what employees do best, it's not necessarily the skill on the resume. It's how they deploy that skill. That's how they do their best work. Right. And so if we place them in positions where they're having to twist and bend and adapt to be able to get work done, a good example of that would be, somebody who naturally sees the big picture, but is chained to a desk, looking at spreadsheets and capturing data all the time.
Right.
That's an extreme example, but it's a good one. I think we can easily understand more about what people do best by shifting from their resume. Sure. I mean, it's great to understand what their past experience is, but how do they work? What do they need? And does that fit with, the expectations and the needs of this role? It's not rocket science, yet so many organizations aren't doing that. And they would be saving lives if they did.
And literally, you're absolutely right. Saving lives. So just to revisit the details, and then let's maybe talk a little bit about which workers. I thought it was interesting. The article highlighted which workers are most disengaged, but the study is showing that 32% of American workers are engaged. And again, as Sara said, an emotional commitment to the organization and its goals. 18% are actively disengaged. So those are the folks that there's apathy, sabotage, subversion. And I know a lot of people, we've had people say, well, why don't they just leave? That's the point. They don't, but they're there and you have to deal with it. So everybody in between is really what we're considering to be disengaged, or just sort of, that state of limbo perhaps. And there are very basic things that you could do to lift them up to create that level of engagement.
As you said that, John, I couldn't help but think about, okay, so if we want to hook a few more managers here about the significance of this, there's what we call what we have to do. So there's an energy and an output for employees to just get their work done.
Right.
But what we've always been trying to tap into for centuries is that discretionary effort that's available where employees could come and do more than just what's expected. So the engagement really is about capturing and capitalizing on that discretionary effort, which isn't just good for the company. It's good for the person. It's good for the employee. And that's where growth and learning and opportunity happen. So I had to comment on that. And I know we're working our way toward breaking down, the specific elements of age, gender, et cetera. But I do have to say, one of the other ideas here that stood out to me was this connection to mission or purpose of the company.
Right.
I mean, I know that's a little squishy to some CEOs and some leadership teams, but it's sort of core. Like if you look at Patrick Lencioni's model, The Advantage, the 6 critical questions, the first one is, why do we exist and what do we do? If you can't answer or have not answered those questions, oh my gosh, then expect your people to just, blow around like a dryer sheet.
Yeah.
Because they're not necessarily going to be clear. I mean, some may do great work, but this is also not rocket science. It's just, it takes time, it takes commitment, it takes discussion, discomfort. But if you could create, let's say you could create, why do we exist and what do we do? And then use that. How do we behave? Look up 6 critical questions. We'll put them in the show notes. If we could land on that and then begin to use that as the framework from which we build other things, I think that would, including our strategy, I think that would make things easier.
Oh, for sure. Well, we have an example currently in with one of our clients. There's an executive team and the CEO who has acknowledged, he has said, I don't think we have really landed on our vision and our strategy for this company. And how can we expect anybody else to embrace that when we haven't even defined it yet? And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those insightful, self-aware executives that say, you know what, we haven't done our work at the top and let's do this. And that's where, of course, and a couple of weeks ago, those of you that were listening probably heard Robert Corser, the CEO for Line of Sight. That's one of our diagnostic platforms. That's specifically what it's built to do, is to measure this. So I love your idea that, look, take this moment, take these results and say, okay, what are we doing at our level? We can pat ourselves on the back, but if our people, if we're not clear, they're not clear. But let's talk a little bit more. I thought what was interesting
wait. One more thing.
Yeah.
Wait, one more thing, John. One more thing. Feeling cared about at work.
Yeah.
Feeling cared about at work. We cannot emphasize enough the power that comes from recognizing the individual employee, like treating the person as an individual person. And this may be a crazy example or not relevant example, but I'm going to share it anyways. There was a private high school that I once worked with, and they were struggling with enrollment. And, they had this admission process and they had this come and visit us kind of process. Anybody who has kids who've ever gone to a religious or private school would appreciate, the pressure to go check them out and, sign up or whatever. But in this case, they just flipped it upside down and said, instead of having people come in mass, let's just have each person, each kid or each family come, and we'll listen to them and understand what they're interested in. And then we'll take them in our school to the places where those things happen. And I'm not kidding you when I say their enrollment jumped by like 25 or 30% that first year. Might even have been more than that. Incredible. And it's that same idea of, don't just herd me along and group me with everybody else. Recognize that I am a head, heart, briefcase. I come with baggage. It's beautiful baggage, but I'm a whole person.
Right.
And there are so many easy ways for us to begin to treat people that way. And we'll talk about this probably more when we get into that hybrid, like be on site kind of work debate that's been going on since the pandemic. But I just thought that was worth noting.
Oh, I totally agree. Totally agree. And And that, again, it doesn't have to be a heavy lift. I mean, when you have you understand somebody's reference profile, their behavioral DNA, you can customize their onboarding so easily and make them feel like they are seen, heard, they belong, and they are part of something very special. That's where you win hearts and minds versus that herd mentality. I love that idea. And we will be right back.
With employee disengagement at its highest level in 9 years, your company can't afford to miss the mark when it comes to optimizing your hiring, management, and team performance practices. At its lowest level, employee turnover costs you $11,000 per person, and those are dollars you can easily save with the right set of people analytics. Real Good Ventures is a talent optimization consultancy specializing in world-class analytics specific to your people and the critical role they play within your organization. Gain confidence in your hiring practices, keep the boss holes from driving your talent away, design your teams for flawless execution, and create a culture that offers meaning and fulfillment. Real Good Ventures has a family of validated diagnostic tools specific to the human aspect of business, because we know that all business issues are people issues. Visit us today at www.realgoodventures.com and bring meaning and fulfillment back into your workplace.
Okay, let's get back to the program. No, the one thing that I thought was interesting in the study is it talked about younger workers, those under the age of 35, saw a bigger drop in engagement than workers ages 35 or older. And younger workers were more likely than older employees to have experienced declines in feeling cared about, right there. Having someone who encourages their development back to the learning and development, that ought to be ongoing. I can't believe we're even still talking about learning and development in organizations. That ought to be automatic, but apparently it's not. Opportunities to learn and grow, their opinions count. In other words, having a voice. You know, we talk a lot about belonging, but feeling like I have a voice, and, you know, we have the level of psychological safety that my voice can be heard, and I can challenge the status quo, or maybe point something out without the fear of intimidation or embarrassment or, you know, whatever it may be. And then I thought this was interesting. We talked a little bit about it before, but the article says having a best friend at work. And I've never thought about a best friend at work, but I'm also well over 35. What are your thoughts about that?
I think for this age group, like younger millennials and Gen Zers, I've thought about this a lot. I have a son and daughter who are in the workforce, who are this age. I think, you know, for people like you and I, old farts, maybe it's not a best friend, but maybe it's a person. Yeah. It's a sounding board. It's a colleague. It's a comrade.
A trusted comrade. People, yes.
For the younger people, though, you know, maybe it has more significance because of the emphasis on social connection at that age. I mean, that's all I can say without, you know, I don't have any research or expertise in this area other than firsthand experience with my kids and their friends. Just having somebody at work that you can connect with on the regular basis. They know what's going on with you. They have their back. You know what's going on with them. And I can chronicle back through all of my job experiences and say, I've been fortunate enough to have that. In fact, I keep in touch with all of them now that I think about it. Even for, you know, from previous job experiences. So I think for the younger workers, you know, being valued, and we also have to say each person is value, you know, will feel value in a different way. You got to do the work to understand. The other thing we have to confront in the workplace, John, and again, I'm not an expert on this either, is this generational divide. I think we're up to 5 generations in the workplace now.
Yeah, and that's right.
Those of us in the older generations tend to have a story, you know, about the younger generations. You've heard it blathered all over. Oh yeah. And it, you know, it's very generalized that these younger kids, you know, don't have the work ethic, that they, you know, they just too much focus on blending their life and their work. And all they do is want to move up in the organization. Well, I think that if we were to fashion experiences for them where learning and growth were a natural part of that, you know, title and pay would be secondary or even tertiary in their mind. Sure. But it's that opportunity to expand their knowledge and even maybe expand their influence. But again, I don't want to generalize also to large groups of people. It's an individual thing.
It is. And at the same time, in our work, we get to work with some of these, what I would say, the emerging workforce. And whether freshly out of school or they've been in the workforce for 5, 10, 12 years. And I mean, there are some remarkably gifted people out there. And unfortunately, in some cases, they're reporting to or working in a very sort of that old command and control that environment, that old model. And it's just not going to work. That's why we need to reinvent the role of the manager. It has to look different to elevate these. This is our workforce of the future. And gosh, they're going to do amazing things. They're going to do remarkable things, but not under a bunch of boss holes. That is for sure.
No, that's so true. So true. I think the other thing that's really important to know about the study, if we had to ask the question, which workers are most disengaged, people might be surprised to know, or not. Women. Women experienced the greatest decline in engagements. They did women more so than men since 2022. Women report feeling less cared about, having someone who encourages their development, opportunities to learn and grow, that their opinions count, and having a trusted colleague at work. Similar to the younger people, I think what's notable here is, even though we've tried to make concerted effort to elevate, women, elevate status, elevate their pay, we have a heck of a long way to go. Yeah. Long way to go. And I can't, when was this? It was just recently. I'm not lying when I say this, John. I was talking to a woman who was told, hey,
this is gonna really bother me, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It should bother everybody. She was told, hey, it's not you, it's the industry. It's kind of sexist. So I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're never going to be in that chief role because the industry just wouldn't allow for it. Yeah. I'm sorry. That's BS. You probably wouldn't allow for it. As far as women in the workplace, everyone felt the burden of the pandemic, but none so much as women. And I don't mean to generalize or, disclude men from that, because men do also serve in those roles. But for women, having someone who encourages their development and having progress discussions, or having sort of an ally, having progress discussions. Oh my gosh, this is a whole subject that probably should be the focus of another episode, because we could dive deeply into this. But it was noted that women suffer more so in the disengagement category. And then the other one was the type of employment. So were you remote or on site? Oh my gosh. I listen to podcasts at least once a week that are talking about the ongoing debate and challenge and frustration that both employers and employees are having around, remote, hybrid, on-site, et cetera.
If I may, I thought it was interesting how the debate continues in a certain vein around remote, hybrid, back at the office. We've heard recently in the news there are some huge organizations that are mandating that people come back to the office for 4 days a week. You can do that. You can absolutely do that, but don't be surprised when people leave. I think making it so, I want to say, just cold and calculated and said, yeah, we're just going to do this.
Right.
I think you are missing the point. I think you're missing a trend that is clearly, it's not even a trend. It is clearly here. And yes. I think, as it says, employers that are clear about their work structure or engage, candidates about what type of work environment do you need. There's some jobs that have to be done in an office. We totally get that. But to sort of push away the whole remote thing as kind of a fad during the pandemic is so short-sighted. They're going to miss out on some really remarkable potential employees by having such a narrow framework.
Well, and here's some data to back that up. The largest decline in employee engagement was actually among those in remote-ready jobs who are currently working fully on site. So this group saw a pretty significant decline in engagement and a 7-point increase in active disengagement. So these are people that, may, on a few cases, rebel. Well, let's get to the solution part here, John. I mean, this is depressing. It's frustrating. But it's not an unsolvable issue.
Right.
Gallup would say that while only 32% of U.S. employees were engaged in 2022, there are organizations actually that have doubled this percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So in their study, they give awards, and many bodies like this do, to organizations who average 70% employee engagement or higher. And, to be fair, there are organizations who are spending a lot of time and money surveying their staff and doing employee engagement surveys.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we also know that they sometimes don't do anything with that information.
Mm-hmm.
So doing the survey is a great first step, and doing a really good one on top of that. I know our PI platform has a nice, solid, simple, yet very effective engagement survey. There are many out there. But if you're doing the survey, then what are you doing, with the information, and what kind of changes are you willing to make?
Right. Taking action and actually responding to those areas that can have the greatest impact on engagement. I mean, and that's why we love our platform, because it's built into the system, but I don't care what you're doing. Just don't fall victim to the nothing that happens afterward.
Absolutely. When it comes to things that we could do, right,
Mm-hmm.
that our organizations could be doing, how about focus on clarifying expectations?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Most concerning decline has been in the lack of clear expectations for employees. And let's just be fair, it is a new and different time. And some organizations were slammed and became, their service or product in such high demand during the pandemic that they just have never been able to catch their breath or catch up.
Right.
And there's some that had to, lay off employees and even close. But in any case, a lack of role clarity makes anything else we do around engagement or to try to help engagement less impactful. At a minimum, it will, and at the most, it will it'll render them not helpful. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And another one is, and you've heard it from us, actively seek out feedback, not just engagement data, but make your part of your in your toolkit as a manager or supervisor, soliciting feedback informally, constantly. As we say, feedback is the oxygen of engagement. So,
yeah,
Jason Lauritsen, and I'll put this in the show notes, and we're now starting to reference previous episodes that speak to this and give solutions, but he talked about the check-in method. Use that.
Yes.
Go back to the check-in method and start to draw that feedback. You will start to see an absolute change in your working relationships.
Yeah, and that might just be what's needed to save a life. And when I say save a life, I mean, keep somebody at your organization, keep somebody, actually renew someone's vitality and well-being, which is so important. How about we watch out for the most vulnerable of all these populations? That would be young workers who are in remote or hybrid situations. Mm-hmm. So according to Gallup, this is a place to focus. I don't have, a roadmap for you for how to engage hybrid workforce. There's plenty of good. In fact, we have a great resource from PI about ways to sort of solidify relationships in that hybrid workforce. John, can we put that in the show notes as well?
We sure could.
I can't help but think too, most of what we do with clients, John, it's an inside out job. Mm-hmm. So if you're a manager, a leader, stop for a minute, give yourself a little space and time to check in on your own engagement. How are you feeling? What are you doing with your discretionary effort? How's your heart? How's your well-being? What's your burnout level like? You can't give away what you don't have. Mm-hmm. And people like us, no judgment here. We're not out to make you bad people or, lay blame at your feet for disengagement. But, for your own well-being, because the healthier you are, the more whole and complete and the more fulfilled and successful you are, the better for your direct reports, your teams, and your organizations. So there's a lot of good resources to support leaders. And I know during the pandemic, we were watching the engagement data pretty closely. Mm-hmm. And it was the managers who took the hit. Mm-hmm. High-level leaders experienced the stress and the burden of the pandemic. But it was the middle managers who really suffered, trying to, rally the troops, connect everybody, meet the goals and the deadlines, adjust, all that stuff. I mean, I'm not minimizing the impact we all had, but research showed us that was a group that, had more impact.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, you got to take care of yourself, and you got to recognize when you've maybe reached a point at burnout where you're not being effective, or you're not able to see some of this stuff, or maybe you don't care anymore. And that's okay. It's time to move on.
Absolutely.
To move on.
Absolutely. And once again, this is something we've been really consistent about. But as we speak to those managers that are out there, and the burden does fall to that middle management, it always has. But your number one responsibility is to develop other people. And if your company supports that, if the company clears a pathway for you to marshal the resources, help people grow, help them become better versions of themselves, that's great. But if you're in an organization that doesn't support that or value it, but it's something you want to do, find a place that offers that. And I think, Sara, you make a really, really good point. I think this speaks to a lot of people out there. If you're not into developing other people, if you love being an individual contributor, there is no shame in wanting to seek that. No shame in wanting to seek out that fulfillment. And we just have to be very honest about that. But yes, it is. This is why we exist. I mean, the results of this study are exactly why Real Good Ventures was created, and why we've created a wonderful technology stack of diagnostic tools to help our clients. So we just hope it was helpful to share this with you, but we have some work to do.
It's kind of like getting on the scale, once in a while we got to pull out that scale and step on there, and I think I'm doing okay. Oh man, I'm up 3 pounds. That sucks. But we know what to do.
Yep.
There are things we can do.
Yep, we can. So check out the show notes. We'll put a link into the article. We'll put a link to some other episodes that speak to this. We will give some resources. We'll put a link to Gallup's research, and check it out. Let it serve as a basis for understanding how 2023 could be much better.
And lastly, John, if we can be a thought partner with you, give us a call.
Yeah,
we're happy to help you, devise some strategy and some approaches to addressing what is, likely what you're experiencing in your organization. But in the meantime, everybody stay well, and we'll see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
We'd like to thank our guest today on the Boss Hole Chronicles. And if you have a Boss Hole Chronicles story of your own, please email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Once again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you again soon.